Good morning. We are going to study today about the disciple James the Less. Now, James is very obscure in this part of the lesson. We don't have very much about him. So what we're going to focus on is why do we have the less following his name? Well, it could be that he was younger. Now, first of all, let me say this before we start. Remember, we had a James, and we called him James the Greater. So, we've got another James, and this is James the Less. So, why do we have less after his name? It could have been that he was smaller, that he was not as important as the other disciples. And so we don't exactly know why, other than to distinguish this James, James the Less, from James the Greater. The term alludes to that probably he was called the Less to distinguish him from the Greater, and that's actually about all we have to say about less and greater. However, James the Less was one of the disciples. He did live with Jesus. He was sent out on missionary trips to spread the word of Jesus. In all of the lists in the Bible, James the Less is listed toward the end, which indicates that he was less important than the other disciples that we have listed. It distinguishes him by saying that he was the son of Alphaeus. Now you remember James the Greater was the son of Zebedee. So that tells you the difference in the two Jameses. All right. The information about James the Less is very scarce in the Bible. And so we have to just take it that he was important to Jesus because he was one of the disciples. Now let's look at the banner that we have today. The banner that James the Less is associated with is a saw. And this was a horrible method of martyrdom for James the Less. And that's what we will have to remember him by. That he did love Jesus, Jesus loved him, and he was of a great service to Jesus. Today, we're going to close with our mitzvah benediction, and I want to teach you a little thing about this. It is a benediction, but a lot of times groups will say this benediction by looking at each other. Because when we're talking, it's like, may the Lord watch between me and thee while we were absent one from the other. So we're looking at each other. And so that's a good way to remember that, because you really mean it when you say to your friend, and you say this with me, may the Lord watch between me and thee while we are absent one from the other. Amen. Have a good week.